Hi, I'm Kim Gladden. I'm Director of Discipleship for the Wesleyan Church, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar on discipleship in church plants. We're really excited to be here, and so if you're joining us, we're asking you to feel free to comment in the chat room on YouTube or Facebook. We're streaming live in both places and excited about today's conversation. I want to introduce to you my two co-hosts. I'm so happy to have my colleagues here with me. First, we have Zach Coffin from Next Gen.
Always good to be with you, Kim. Another webinar. Here we go.
All right, ready to go. Excited because we're talking about church plants today. I've invited Dr. Ed Love from Church Multiplication.
Good to be here.
Wonderful. Hey, Ed, you know what? As we get ready, just kind of, this conversation is right in your wheelhouse. Would you just give us just one starting point as we get ready to introduce the guests who are going to be on today?
Yeah, well, discipleship is a huge conversation, and every church planter has to be thinking through all of their just the beginning infrastructure of their church plant, and it's so important to have some clarity on that from the beginning. I tell you, from the beginning, here's my one point for you, would be to build your discipleship infrastructure and clarify your disciple-making model before you launch. Don't try to do it after because things get crazy. It's out of control. But have it before you launch and begin working and making disciples at a smaller level with your launch team. And so it just blends into after you launch and there's more people and you actually have places for people to go and for them to fall into and enter into disciple-making relationships. So that's my first thing.
That's your first. Ed, that's great. We're going to hear from you because we're going to be getting more tips right from the man himself later in the show. But that's the first one. And with that, I want to bring in our guest. Our first guest is Andre Winter. He planted a church, the Corner Church in Charleston, South Carolina. And I want to welcome him to today's webinar. And Andre, say hello to us.
Hey, thank you, Kim, so much for letting me be a part of today.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm so excited. When we talked about having a webinar with church planters, you are like red hot off the press, brand new. How many weeks has it been?
Yeah, we opened on September 23rd, so 13 weeks ago we opened.
13 weeks. I don't think we could even get any closer than that. So you represent the church planting community of someone who's right out the gate. So tell us a little bit about your launch and tell us a little bit, Andre, of how do you do discipleship in your church plant?
Yeah, so we are located because our community plays a huge role in how we do discipleship here at the Corner. And so we are in Moncks Corner, South Carolina, which is right outside of Charleston. And so we are in the just typical classic Bible Belt community of the South. And so when we came into wanting to plant a church here, we knew that we were going up with, just a lot of people who have had a lot of church experiences. And so the community who we were wanting to help lead to Christ and see people have just be real renewed relationships with Him. Have had church experiences, they've done the Sunday school process and everything like that. And so our discipleship process, the pathway that we wanted to kind of cut out for people, really is very intentional. It's very heavy on every moment and not just on a certain scheduled class. And so whether, if we're setting up and tearing down because we're a portable church in our middle school, we're making sure that we're doing even discipleship there. And so just modeling that for ourselves. But discipleship for us is not just helping people understand and learn information, but really see the essence of who they are changed by the gospel. And so, like I said, that doesn't happen with somebody just completing a class, but really through every one-on-one moment, through every group activity, through every dinner we have together, really seeing people work towards becoming a carrier of the gospel. And for us, that is our goal in discipleship. We want to see people connect, be a part of our church family. We want to see people begin to create just a journey of faith with Jesus. And then through that journey of faith and creating that, begin to cultivate it, make it deeper, let it begin to change the essence of who they are, and then move on to being a carrier of the gospel themselves, being someone who makes disciples. And so that is the just the focus of what we really are creating with our discipleship pathway.
So Andre, one question I have for you, with that being the heartbeat. So one thing Ed just shared was like before the launch, helping embed discipleship into the very essence of who you are. How did you process that as the church planter? Say, no, like we're not just going to do this, this, or this, but like really discipleship has to be at the center of who we are before we even open the doors. How did you guys process and work through that?
Yeah, and so our story as a brand new church is a little bit different than the typical norm, because it pretty much just started with me and my wife, and then we grew by 50% when we had our son, and so which was pretty awesome. And so, and this is all just last year. This is all a year ago. Oh my word! This time a year ago, it was still just the three of us. But as we started to see more families kind of join in the process, and so we do have an amazing sending church, Providence Church, which is right here in Charleston, an amazing sending church. We're so grateful for them. A few families have been a part of this process, have kind of been sent out with us. And so I kind of say all that to state that everybody who is a part of our church today is brand new. And so everybody is brand new to either the journey of faith or either kind of coming back after being disconnected from God. And so within our church plant, what we've done is I've done a lot. It's a lot of one-on-one, getting to hear people's stories, having dinners, meeting together. And so, for example, we have what we call a Discover the Corner dinner. And so that's kind of our very first door that people meet to kind of get more integrated into our church. And so instead of it being a class or a gathering, we have a dinner together. And so my wife and I make tacos or baked potatoes or whatever, can feed a group of people. And we sit around a table and we share stories and get to know each other. And so kind of once getting to build those relationships and then getting to see where people are at, and then getting to just through life together, grow as a disciple, then getting to invite people to take on more, kind of step more into where their gifting is, what their passions are, getting to lead in different capacities. Here pretty soon we'll get to see some people who've been with us since January in our pre-launch life, who will soon be leading, discipleship groups, which is amazing to see, like, oh my word, just the growth that's happened in them. And so that's been a huge part of how we've been creating our leaders and just discipling people, getting ready for, a lot of the bones of our discipleship pathway.
It sounds like you have been, being intentional in that process. And I was just thinking about what you were saying and the fact that you said everybody's new. And so that's one of the things that we want to talk a little bit about, because I think that might be one of the challenges
Absolutely.
in a church plant where everybody's new. And what does that do to the dynamics? What does that do to the availability of folks that you have for leaders? So, what are some of the particular challenges, or let's say opportunities that come with everybody being new?
Yeah, I'd say with us being a brand new church, everybody is needed. Everybody is needed in some way, some form. And so one of the challenges that we run up against is we have experienced this, which has been unfortunate, is that we begin to lean on certain people, and then it usually takes we usually find that that they're coming to a place of unpacking their bags is a term that I've heard before, where they're beginning to kind of show more of just kind of what's happening inside of them, which isn't wrong. But a lot of that stuff leads to some destructiveness within our church family. And so I guess that's one huge obstacle that we face, is as we begin to lean on people to lead a discipleship group, or leaning on people to say, hey, do you want to do this? We then get to see that they're not in a place where we thought they were, or where they said they were. And so I guess with us being new, it's just a lot of trust, depending on people, and then getting to run into those kinds of moments.
Yeah, that's great, Andre. I can relate with you a lot, and understand those dynamics where it's like everybody's new and you're not sure how mature people really are, even if they do have some church experience, and they've been a part of the church.
Mhm.
What has kind of been your strategy personally for making disciples? Like what? Because a lot of times, I mean, it just like you said, it begins with you. Like it was just you and your wife and a baby and a cat, maybe. You can count cats in
Absolutely.
your church attendance.
I
By the way.
I
So-
disagree. Cats are terrible.
All right, dogs. Can we count?
You can count your
All
dogs.
right. Okay.
Just throw it in there. You had 4. But for you personally, what did it look like to make disciples and begin that journey? And what would be a story? Do you have a story of someone that you have just seen come alive in that would be just encouraging you and your team as it actually works, like discipleship works?
Yeah. And so kind of our process, our pathway that we're going to, because I mean, like with everybody being new, a majority of people are only so far through the process or so far through just the pathway. And so kind of like I mentioned earlier, how we have our Discover the Corner dinner. It's basically a dinner that we have that kind of is like a newcomers gathering where we get together, share stories, get to know people, share about our church, share about our DNA and what our vision, our dream is for our community, and what we really believe God is wanting to do in our city through the corner. And so after that, we kind of begin to get people plugged into serving, kind of some bones of ways that we really have just kind of set in place for people to be discipled through. Is I kind of learned this from a good friend and a church planting coach, John West. He kind of came up with a pathway that I absolutely love, kind of integrating people into what he calls a community group, a C group, where people find a great sense of community and belonging, but at the same time, they also they are loving our city. And so community group doesn't just exist for themselves, but they are a community that exists for the community. And so we are kind of preparing leaders right now in the life of our church, being 13 weeks old. We're preparing leaders to be our C group leaders, where we'd have groups meet together. They act as a community. They don't act. They don't pretend. They genuinely are just a family together. People have a greater, deeper sense of just family. So it's not just Sunday morning, but even throughout the week. But they don't just meet just to have a meal. Where they meet, they pray, share devotion, and they also are really emphasized towards missions. And so we have a lot of neglected people here in our city, which really breaks my heart. How we have respite foster homes and nursing homes and different pockets where people are really neglected. And so we really want to be a church that loves people so well, loves people in a way that this community has never been loved before. Because a lot of churches in our city have kind of closed the door on really what's happening in Moncks Corner. And so, seeing these groups go out together, be a part, going and singing Christmas carols at a nursing home, for example, but doing something that's regular, that acts in that way. And then also seeing people integrated into our, what we'll call discipleship groups, our D groups, which is a much heavier sense of more Bible study, more accountability. That's where a lot of, I guess, learning and discovering and rubbing off of each other kind of happens in our discipleship groups, a lot more intimate. So instead of it being 15, 20 people, or it gets scaled down to 3 to 6. And so a lot more intentional as far as just accountability. And so as far as just the bones of what our discipleship pathway will look like, that's kind of it for us.
Any stories of someone that's just already started going through that you just see like amazing transformation?
Yeah. And so we have a couple. I talk about them all the time. Their names are Stephanie and Donnie. And they, like a lot of people here in our city, hated church. I mean, just to hear some of the things that have happened to them by church from the churches breaks my heart. I mean, just to think about what they've told me. And so we're now getting to see them really go deep into just being leaders within the corner as they're being discipled. And so, for example, Donnie, the husband, just a guy who swore he'd never go to church. Stephanie's telling us that he's doing crazy things like reading his Bible.
Crazy.
And so, yeah, crazy things. And this guy who said he would never be a part of a church, he is now one of our core people in creating this church. And so he hasn't yet given his life to Christ, but I believe will happen very soon. And then Stephanie, who, my wife is our worship leader, and Stephanie is kind of her right-hand person. And my wife, Erin, is kind of already cultivating her to be a worship leader. And so Stephanie and Donnie are kind of beginning, we really see them becoming a community group leader. And so we're beginning to intentionally prepare them for that because they're amazing people. And it is powerful to see just the development that's happened inside of them in just the last few months that we've known them.
Andre, that's so exciting to hear. And I think that's part of when we talk about discipleship in a church plant, those fresh stories, those
Absolutely.
folks who are growing along with you and growing into things. We know that it's just been 13 weeks, but I just want to hear a little bit in closing from you about your hopes for the types of disciples. What kind of disciples do you hope will be emerging from the Corner Church? And just share with us a little bit of your heart, because I know you're still, this is all real new. This is all in the beginning stages. You've identified some processes and plans, but what kind of disciple is it that you're hoping for that will be produced there at the Corner Church?
Yeah, so like I shared earlier about the connect, the create, cultivate, and carry. Our dream is to see people really become carriers of the gospel. And so we know that especially nowadays, people are moving pretty frequently. And so people only live in a place for a couple of years and they move somewhere else, changing jobs. And so we understand that people are with the Corner for a season, that they're not part of the church for 20 years like it was a couple of generations ago. And so we really want to see this season of their life as a part of this church family be one that takes them deeper and gets them even more ready and well equipped to be a carrier of the gospel. So wherever they go next, a new job or a new community where they move to, they are ready to be a person who makes other disciples, who is just so open and excited to share their faith and to be a great vessel of the Spirit wherever they go. And so I say that's one element. Another element, too, is preparing people to plant churches. And so we have a dream of seeing 50 churches planted in Charleston. And so we're number 4 of that dream. And so we really want to begin preparing people to kind of become either a pastor or even a lay leader that can go out a part of a team to plant a church.
Ed Love just about jumped out of his seat when you said, you couldn't see him, but when you said that, our multiplication director just about jumped out of his seat with happiness. Just wanted you to know.
Andre, we had a question come in from the chat room that I wanted to throw at you. The church that sent you out, what were some of the things that they did to help prepare you by launching your church from a discipleship perspective specifically?
Mm-hmm. I'd say for me, I got to, the lead pastor is also my father-in-law, and so I have that great connection. Sometimes awkward one too, but that great relationship. But he was very intentional on discipling and preparing me through the 13 characteristics of kind of preparing somebody to be a church planter. And so as far as a one-on-one for me directly, that's a big way that he, invested and discipled me, preparing me to, lead teams and communicate and different things like that, go into the 13 characteristics of being a lead church planter. And so for me personally, that's one way that I was discipled from our sending church and my sending pastor. As far as us as a church plant, only a few people that are part of our church now have any ties to our sending church. And so, and even then, they were brand new to Providence. And so they received some great, a lot of great discipleship through Providence, which prepared them to be a part of our church plant to help us create the DNA and the life of our church. And so they get the multiplying emphasis that we have in our heart. But does that kind of
Yeah,
resonate?
man, that's great. And what I love about what you said is you acknowledge that you had someone in your life discipling you. And I think it's so, I don't know if this is true for you guys, but I know for me at different times in ministry, I've had to be extremely intentional for people to speak discipleship into me that I'm not just pouring out. And so I just appreciate the fact that even you were willing to do that early as a church planter, brother. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Andre, I just want to say thank you for sharing. We just appreciate you coming on and sharing from your 13-week journey. And we'll be praying for you and excited about what God's going to be doing there. We're going to be transitioning in a moment, bringing in Arlen and Robert Ellis to talk about church planting, and they've been at it just a little bit longer. But before we do that, since I've got Dr. Love in the studio, how about a second tip for those who are church planting and thinking about discipleship?
Okay. Second tip for church planners, what they need to know before they go. I would say this: begin with the end in mind and be processing the question, what is your end result? And Andre said this really well just a moment ago. What is the desired end result, and work back from there and begin your discipleship strategy and your process from there. Jesus did this with his disciples, even when he first called them. If you remember in Matthew 4, he called his disciples. He's on the shoreline and they're out there fishing, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. And he actually tells them, he says, hey, come follow me. That's the discipleship piece. You're going to be my follower. And then he tells them right then what the end result is. And it's interesting. He says, Jesus' end result, which should be ours, is I'm going to send you out to fish for people. Good. Like that was the end result. And so be thinking about that in your mind as you frame your discipleship. The end result is actually evangelism. And knowing if that's the end result, how do we work back from there? What do we do with our people to help them be disciple makers and be sent ones in the world, and develop your discipleship strategy and your framework from that point on? So that's the second tip.
So good.
Begin with the end in mind.
That's good. You are 2 for 2
Two
with
for
these
two.
tips.
Good.
You're 2 for 2
Good.
with these tips. Hey, if you're out there and listening, how about send in? We got Dr. Love here, so let's utilize him. I'd love to speak now with. I'm so happy to welcome Robert and Arlen Ellis, and they are church planners. Can you say hello to us and greet us?
Hi, how are y'all?
Hi.
Wonderful. We want to just welcome you and ask you to tell us a little bit also about your church planting journey, because it's been I think a little bit more than 13 weeks, and so we're going to invite you to from another perspective. Tell us a little bit about your church launch and how you came to plant, and just share with us a little bit about your ministry context.
Well, first of all, listening to Dr. Ed Love here, I realized that he's 2 for 2. I must be 0 for 2. So we didn't necessarily have all the strategies in mind when we started. This is we're actually on our third church plant. We planted in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We were housed out of First Wesleyan Church there. That's where I met my wife, and she was studying at the University of Alabama. And we planned a Hispanic church, all Spanish speaking, and that was where my calling was to launch and plant Hispanic churches. And then it's kind of grown from that and changed out of that. And so when we got married, we came to San Antonio. We're invited here to plant Crossroads Church. It started off as a Spanish speaking only, or a Spanish speaking and an English speaking church. We started 2 services, and then gravitated just to an English service. So we probably didn't start with, we started with the end in mind, as Dr. Love pointed out, but we had to be flexible. So we had ideas in our head of how it should look and would look, and then it took on different traits. And then just this past year, we were asked to restart a church in outside of the San Antonio area, about 35 minutes. And so we're about 6 months into that, and we merged the 2 campuses, but it is essentially a church plant starting over there.
Hey, I've got to disagree with you. I've got to say you're 3 for 3. If you've planted 3 times,
That's right.
You are 3 for 3. Arlen, tell us a little bit about how do you guys do discipleship, and particularly how do you do discipleship in the church plant?
Well, one of the key things that we had to do when we first moved, even from Tuscaloosa, but here also in Texas, is understanding our community and who it was that we were serving. Understanding what the needs were of the community and understanding what their church background was. We found that when we first moved here, there was a large percentage, a lot higher than 50%, of people who just never gone to church. And they had gone to church, it had been probably once when they were a baby or something like for Christmas. And so we knew that we were reaching a community that was completely unchurched. And so we had to really rely on building relationships, really getting to know the community where they were, going out and really spending quality time with the family so that we could eventually start bringing them into the church setting and feel comfortable where we were. And so we didn't have right away people who were ready to teach a Bible study, because I don't think anyone knew, or a lot of people didn't know even how to open the Bible. And so we knew it was okay. That wasn't part of the big requirement. It's a church plant. And so we started with that, with really the basic, getting to know people, getting to really build trust and understand that some have a different background. Is that San Antonio is a very rich cultural community. And so there's a Spanish influence, but there's also Tex-Mex background. And there's some other, obviously, ethnicities. And so we had to really come to understand the Spanish-speaking community. And for us, it's very comfortable. And also the second, third, fourth generation of Hispanics in here. So we start with building relationships and eventually start bringing in place that infrastructure that we were just referring about earlier in this webinar. And so we wanted to start bringing them slowly, because it wasn't really comfortable to a lot of them.
And if I could chime in, the very first day we felt it was necessary to plant the DNA of serving. And so we've all heard the statistics, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. And so from the very first day, we said we want to be 80-20, where 80% of the people, I don't know if that actually does that, but 80% of the people do all the work. And so I don't know what those percentages work out to be, but we wanted people more involved. And so the whole idea of connecting people to Christ, His church, and serving, kind of that slogan kind of evolved a little bit. And that was a little bit of napkin theology with Dwight Nash and I at a youth camp, just figuring out how are we going to do this. And connecting is what we came up with, connecting people to this and asking people and challenging them to serve. And when we found that sometimes it's not connecting people to Christ first and then to the church and then to the calling, we thought that was the logical order. But instead, we ended up finding out that it was you get people plugged into serving, and then later they come to know Christ, and then they plug into the church or some variation of that. But it was a challenge to serve. And very similar to what Jesus said, come and follow me. And so we were challenging people to come and follow us. And as we were following Christ, to come and join us in that.
I'm happy to hear you just mention how you were thinking about your community. You didn't just go in and say, I'm a plug in this model, or I'm going to plug in that, but you were actually wanting to take the time and to listen and to hear the heart of your community and say, now what would be the best approach, or what might be a way? And so I'm delighted to hear that, because so often we forget that for many communities, particularly non-white communities, that relational piece is that's where you enter. That's how you get in. That's how you move through the door. So I was excited to hear that. What are some of the challenges, just as we were asking Andre, in terms of, how do you do it? How do you get this discipleship into the life of a new church plant?
Yeah, I think for the most part, you're dealing with each individual. Each person has their own challenges, or even their own hang-ups and their own perceptions of what church is. And so it starts by just meeting individuals. And so for us, when you're thinking about church planting, there's always this pressure of people. The more people you have, you think about the resources needed to keep the church doors open. And there's all kinds of things. You want people to come to know Christ. You also want the doors to stay open. And there's this balancing act at times. And so you've got to be really careful that you're not just seeking out numbers. Because then you start compromising. And so I remember a quote, and I might butcher it a little bit, but from Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Church. And he said, if you want to have a church of 1,000, you got to be willing to watch 2,000 walk away, or some variation of that. And you can scale that back down to, if you want to have a church of 100, you've got to be willing to watch a couple hundred walk away. But what really solidified in my mind as we went along was, God's called us to be a church for some people, but not everyone. And so that shift of when people would come in and visit and check us out, they all didn't become disciples. They either did or did not gravitate to what we were trying to do in the church. And so wrestling with that and just having a peace that God was drawing people to Crossroads Church, and it's okay if some chose to go somewhere else. That was really a big thing, because you could take every disciple, everyone who came in and left, you would think, well, that's a failure, and you really have to get past that and see who God's brought in and just pour into those who stay.
That's so good. We've got a question from the chat room that's really similar, in line with this. So often when we talk about church planning, we're focused on everybody that's new, or maybe people who aren't familiar with the gospel. But we do have people that come to our church that are very familiar with the gospel, that maybe feel stalled out or stuck. So Kent, in the chat room, he's asking, how do we help people who are kind of maybe more established in their faith but are uncertain of how to help bring change in their own life, and they're not really sure how to maybe change or connect? How do we help the people who are maybe more of those long-term faith people? How are you guys handling that?
Right, and I think in whether you've been in church all your life or you've just been there for a few weeks, one of the things that we all have in common is that we want to find purpose. We want to be able to serve and know that God designed us for something special. So even those who have been in the church for a long time and are still trying to find a location, maybe because they moved to a new area or whatever it may be, it's finding purpose. And so everyone has a place in the church. And so when we do have people who have been in church for a while and really want to serve, the first question we ask is, okay, I want to hear about you. Tell us what you love, what you're passionate about, what your call is. And if you don't know it, let's find it. Let's discover it together. It doesn't happen in one conversation. It happens in actually several tacos conversations. We have to really get down and understand, but also share my story, our story, the church story, the community story, and find common factors and finding ways that we really can plug them in. We've had people that have been here in the church for a long time and just last year, 2 years ago, found a new calling, found a reason, found something else that just connected them in a different manner. And we thought, okay, well, we thought they knew it all along. But we're looking, we, as individuals, we're constantly looking for better ways to serve God. It doesn't matter, how old we've been in the faith or not. I wasn't raised in the church. And so oftentimes I tell myself, what is it that other people want when they come to church for the first time? Because at one time I felt it as well when I first came to the church. And understand that church doesn't have to be just the way it was when you were growing up or how you thought it was. Church may look very different today. And so be willing to be flexible to do new kind of ministries, to be able to have the doors open every day and not just Wednesday and Sunday. That church is to be active on a Monday, on a Tuesday, on a Thursday, on a Friday. And it may not always be a Bible study. It may be what we call a cafecito, right? Or what we may have a conversation about life, a conversation about parenting, a conversation about health. And so because we're impacting every aspect of the life of the family.
And if I can continue a little bit, one of the things we realized a couple of years back was outreach, and how will outreach take place? How will we draw people in, and how will we minister to their needs? And so my wife comes out of a strong nonprofit background, having worked in a couple of large nonprofits, and so then she said, what if we start doing something like this here in our community? And so out of our church we started the Acts of Hope Center. So it's its own 501c3. But what it does is the church partners with Acts of Hope Center so that the needs can be met of the community. Sometimes the church just can't get in the doors. There's some places that the doors are shut for the church. And so through the Acts of Hope Center and through our serving model, we have parenting classes, we have health education. We've
got another question that came in. It's kind of a follow-up from something we were talking about earlier. It's coming in from the chat room. How do we rule a line between people not made for our church or church not hospitable enough? That was how the question's coming in. I've got some thoughts, but I'll let you. I've got some things I'd like to say, but I'm going to let you go ahead and
I don't
answer
think
that.
our goal is to ever run anyone off. I think we just, I think we love them and we share with them the truth. And I think most of the time when people don't stay at a church, it's usually a stylistic thing. It's usually a music component. It's a preaching style that they're looking for. It's maybe there's not enough things for their children, or they've got teens. And so I think as pastors, I think, we want to be as hospitable. And so one of the things we did when we started the church was we made sure that every member knew that the 5 or 10 minutes before the service and 5 or 10 minutes after the service, we wanted to be the most welcoming church around. And that still has stuck in our DNA. But then not take it personal when people do decide that this is not really the right fit for them. And so that was kind of the balance we had to strike.
It's hard. It's really difficult at times, especially if you're planting a church and you get so excited when you see 1 or 2, 50 or 100, and the next Sunday you don't see the same number. So it's hard, but to understand that that's okay. It's just a number. You're still impacting people's life, and this is beyond just an attendance on a Sunday. It's what's happening on a Monday, like I say, what's happening on a Friday. There are deeper conversations that take place during the week. And so it is okay. You just accept it. As you see, we look very different. And so I think we are able to bring in a different kind of backgrounds. But if you see our church, we have every single ethnicity probably present. But even if there is one that is not represented and doesn't feel comfortable, it's all right. It's not a big deal. We still love, we still talk. I have all of them on Facebook. We still hang around during the weekend when we need to. We may still serve parents during the week with giving them diapers, but we may not worship together on a Sunday, and that's okay.
I'm sorry. Was I cutting you off?
Yeah, I got a little question. Can I ask this? You kind of brought it up there, something I was thinking about, just the cultural differences that you two have as a couple, one, but also in a very diverse church. I think you describe yourself as multi-ethnic, but how have you seen that cultural difference actually serve as a part of a discipleship tool, if you will, or something that led people deeper in their discipleship? Have you seen that? And any examples you might point out?
Well, I think one of if hopefully I'm getting your question the right way, but one of the things by being a multi-ethnic church is it's the inroad. People see that. People walked in. When we first started the church, let me go back. We put the name El Centro Cristiano on our church, the Christian Center. And we had people who actually stayed away from our church because their Spanish wasn't good enough. They're like, oh, if I go in here, it's going to be all Spanish and I won't know what's going on. So we realized we made, I don't know if it was a slight miscalculation in our demographic research. I would say, just as a side note to people who are going into church planting, do your homework and then have someone check your homework. So we probably should have started with a different name and really looked at how that demographic would receive that. But then when people do walk in and they see the differences and the appreciation for differences in our congregation, it helps, because when Jesus is calling people, he's not calling just one group, he's calling all groups. And so for discipleship to even take place, barriers have to come down. And so at least in our context, we feel like the barrier and who we are has come down. And also, now San Antonio is very different than other metropolitan areas in the United States, in the fact that it has the Hispanic population is the majority, 54%, I believe. So our church needed to reflect that community, and I think that opens the door for discipleship. If at any point your church isn't reflective of who the people you're trying to reach, then you've already shut the door for that to happen.
So in another sense, it has helped to reach and disciple new individuals. And so if we need to go on a Spanish mode, we go. If we go into a Tex-Mex mode, we go. If it's just English, I stay very quiet. I'm just kidding. No. We are able to adapt and be flexible.
Yeah.
But it is not only Spanish and English. There's other languages represented here and backgrounds. And so we just have people this week come from refugees from Ethiopia. And so we were able to bless them and talk, and very limited, but we were able to. And be welcoming, and that's okay. We welcome every single background, and for a new church plant, not every city has the same kind of cultural backgrounds, but still be able to adapt to what those community and families look like and talk about.
Thank you. You know, I'm going to want to explore more about that because, Ed, that's a terrific question, and we'd like to even have a whole show and just kind of dig and drill down into that. I don't have time to do it today. I want to thank you. In just a moment, we're going to go over to Dr. Love, but the same maybe just a minute to tell us your hopes for the type of disciple that's going to be produced out of your churches. What are you hoping for? And then we're going to go to Dr. Love.
Well, I think our heart is church planting, and so we would hope that every disciple that comes through Crossroads Church would also have a heart to see that it's not just the local context. Church when you think about church planting, you're planting disciples, but you plant and you grow, and then it's that last phase that we really have to determine what is it going to be. You plant, you grow. Do you die? You plant, you grow, you harvest, and you just sit on that harvest? Or do you plant and grow and then plant again? And so we would hope that every disciple, when they leave here, would have a passion and desire to see more churches planted and more people come to know Christ.
Okay, Dr. Ed's getting real excited again hearing that. But no, thank you so much for joining us. We got a couple minutes left, and Dr. Love, here we go. Tips from your fount of wisdom. We're going to tap in.
Yeah, I got a couple more mentioned too already. Build your discipleship infrastructure and clarify your disciple-making model from the beginning before you launch. 2 was begin with the end in mind. What's the end result? 3 would be this. Be sure to include evangelism training in your discipleship track. So don't disconnect those 2 realms thinking that they're separate, because good discipleship should lead to evangelism, and evangelism should lead to discipleship. So keep it more of a holistic framework around those 2 realms and lead people in that direction. And I've noticed if you're not intentional about that, a lot of times that can be a missing piece. Like you could be really strong in what you perceive as discipleship, but it's not leading to other people, discovering who Jesus is. And so that's important to keep in mind. Include that. 4th thing would be this. Be okay with starting small and invest in a few disciple makers. So like Andre mentioned, doesn't have a lot of what would be perceived as mature Christians that to begin with, because you got a lot of new people. You're just building trust and rapport with each other. So don't worry about that, though. Just start with a few, and you may have to start with yourself. I love Zechariah 4:10 says, don't despise the small beginnings. And knowing that your discipleship culture is going to grow and develop, but don't think you got to have, you get everything all in one shot and everyone just has to be solid and strong right away. Just start small, take your time, and watch out what will happen. The 5th thing would be this: lead by example. And I think as the church planter, you are the one that everything in the beginning, it's flowing through you. And that's just God's design. But you be the one that's making disciples. You be the one that's reaching out. You be the one, and model that from the beginning. Tell stories about that, and people will take note of you, and they'll start imitating you. They'll start wanting to do those same sorts of things, wanting to have the same types of stories of making disciples. So lead by example. Sixth thing would be this. Set the discipleship tone from the beginning within your partnership or membership structure. So you're going to have some sort of framework around your new church community. And the great thing about a church plant is that it's a clean slate. Like there's no history you're really dealing with or trying to redo, but you've got a clean slate to start with everybody. And you can set the tone from the beginning. We're going to be a disciple-making church. And that's a great advantage to do that from the beginning. And you can implement that into your membership structure, whatever that would look like for your church. The seventh thing would be this. This is really important. Get your people talking more about Jesus than they do your church or the church leaders.
Unpack it.
So good. This is so good.
Watch what happens.
This is so good.
Watch what happens. I remember one time I had this realization where it just kind of a culmination of weeks maybe of going to my church. I'm the preacher. I'm leading, but I realized I had no conversations about Jesus with anybody at my church. I'm the pastor, and I noticed I don't hear a lot of people talking about Jesus. And it just stung me to the core. And I actually rebuked our church in a gentle way. But I said, I don't want to hear you talking about the church more. I don't want to hear you talking about me or the funny things in my message. I want to hear you talking about Jesus. Let's talk about Jesus.
Absolutely.
That's why we have the church in the first place. And so I think that's just important just to keep in mind. That can change your entire culture, is just having people, giving them permission. And sometimes the leader has to do that and confess it, just to say, I want us to be centered around Jesus. He is the head of our church. We're following him. And everything that we do, that's just going to permeate the culture around here. And so ask your friend, don't just talk about the Detroit Lions and how bad they're doing. Sorry, Detroit.
For like the last 20 years.
The Detroit
But
who?
Yes, seriously.
talk about your walk with the Lord. That would be my
so good,
last
man.
point. So
I appreciate that so much because I think we've seen this trend of talking about our churches as brands.
exactly.
So we do a lot of brand management by talking about our church before anything else or what our church has done for people. And yes, the church is the bride of Christ, but she's the bride.
Yeah.
So oh man, that's so good, brother. Oh, I love it.
That's good. We've had a great conversation. I'm so thankful to my co-hosts, Zach Coffin and Ed Love. I'm so thankful for our guests who were on, and you can connect with them also. That was Andre Winter and then Robert and Arlen Ellis. And hey, we're out of time, but hopefully we've planted some things for you to just think about what are some of the challenges and opportunities in church planting for discipleship. And I think those tips are good for all of us. We have whatever stage we're in our church planting. So until next time, may you journey on in peace.